Hello everyone. Today we'll be learning about the rich history behind the rise and fall of Rome, and how the significance of the legacy of Rome still holds importance until today. Now to start off simple, what is Rome? Well, Rome is a city that resides along the western peninsula of Italy and is also the capital of Italy. So when did Rome actually start, you might ask? Well, from a combination of archaeological discoveries and information from local legends, we can conclude that the foundation of Rome began in the 8th century BCE. But an official date is hard to find as the area has a long history of many different communities that have been spanning for way longer than Rome. But according to the Roman mythology I mentioned earlier, Rome was founded in 753 BCE by Romulus and Remus. They founded a city along the banks of the Tiber River by having many local villages unify together. Romulus would later kill his brother Remus in a dispute over location, and Romulus would then take the title of king and create the Kingdom of Rome, and Rome being named after himself obviously. After Romulus, his position would be taken over by other non-related successors from other nearby Italian civilizations, such as the Latin, Sabine, and Etruscan people. During this period, Rome was ruled by a monarchy, and the timeline of this monarchy would contain 7 kings. The span of this monarchy would last over 2 centuries, beginning with Romulus in 753 BCE and ending with Tarquin the Proud in 509 BCE. Each of the 7 kings would make some notable changes and contributions towards the growth of Rome, but this all came crashing down when the last king of Rome, Tarquin the Proud, was overthrown by the people, when many had hatred over his tyrannical and cruel-like rule over Rome. After this, the power of the monarch was decided to be passed down onto 2 individuals called consuls, who were elected by a senate each year, thus starting the era of the Republic of Rome. Also, fun fact, the word republic is a word derived from Latin called res publica, meaning property of the people. Now you might think that stability in the republic would flourish now that some people will be able to have influence in the senate, but although that did happen to some extent, there was still an issue at hand when it came to stability. The Senate consisted of mostly patricians, which were the powerful and wealthy elites of society. This was not the best for plebeians, who were the common and average working people of Rome. This would inevitably lead to ever-increasing tensions between the elite class and middle class of the Republic. Hey, but besides politics and power, let's look back into the geography of Rome. Over the course of time we have discussed, Rome has expanded its borders to the surrounding hills and mountains and also has been continuing along the shore of the Tiber River. This centered the city into an area that would allow it to be protected by natural barriers and be able to provide itself with the necessary resources to grow. The geographical position of Rome was nearly perfect for it to flourish with life, and therefore the people of Rome would thrive under these conditions. But now, back to Republic. In 450 BCE, the first Roman laws were inscribed on 12 bronze tablets, known as the 12 Tables. These tables were publicly displayed in the Roman Forum, which was a site located at the center of Rome and an important location of religious, political, and social activities, in case you were wondering. Anyways, the laws on the tables included issues of legal procedure, civil rights, and property rights, and many other things that basically provided the basis of all future Roman civil law, which would be one of the many extremely important advancements that the Republic would make. Speaking of advancements, Rome began to focus on more physical advancements. As the years went by, Rome would start claiming more and more territory, and around 260 BCE, Rome would start to control most of the Italian peninsula by expanding to other parts of Italy. But with Rome's expansion into most of Italy, they had been noticed by another great power, Carthage. Carthage was another great city-state located in modern-day Tunisia. Carthage had control of the Mediterranean and was a very powerful civilization that had expanded its territories along the coast of North Africa. At this time, Carthage was more powerful than Rome was and had control of some Italian lands like Sicily. This eventually led to the Punic Wars, an important turning point in Roman history. The Punic Wars were a series of 3 wars between 264 BCE and 146 BCE, fought by Rome and Carthage. In 264 BCE, the first war began as a result of control over Sicily. and would last 23 years until 241 BCE, when the Romans eventually and miraculously managed to defeat the Carthaginians after a long and brutal war. There were heavy losses on both sides, but Rome did manage to annex Sicily and get reparations from Carthage. The Second Punic War would take place in 218 BCE, when the Carthaginian armies led by famous general Hannibal Barca crossed the Alps and managed to invade mainland Italy. The Roman Republic was on the losing side at the start of the war, but they would start battling Carthage on their own Carthaginian lands and on the Iberian Peninsula, which is now modern-day Spain and Portugal, and along the coast of North Africa. The Romans eventually won the war after 16 years of fighting on many different fronts throughout the war. At the end of the war in 201 BCE, a treaty was signed between Rome and Carthage. Rome would take all of Carthage's overseas territories and some of its homeland ones too. Carthage was basically having to pay large reparations and would have the size of its military, now restricted by Rome. At this point, Carthage was no longer the dominant force of the Mediterranean, and the balance of power has been permanently shifted in Rome's favor. The last and final Punic War was fought in 149 BCE, when Rome declared war on Carthage. At this point, this would mark the end of Carthage as a whole, and all of Carthage's mainland territory would be taken in the span of 3 years. In 146 BCE, the Roman army stormed the city of Carthage itself and absolutely destroyed it and slaughtered the majority of the population. This was the end of the Punic Wars and Carthage. Now, I know I spent a lot of time covering the Punic Wars, but trust me, this was completely life-changing for the future of Rome. Since the Punic Wars started, Rome didn't have too much power with the Mediterranean and other nearby regions, and land back in ancient times was a vital asset of any growing civilization. The Republic would gain so much land as a result of the Punic Wars that it would just make back for the heavy losses, and there were so many more benefits that Rome would gain as a result from fighting the Punic Wars. But territory isn't the only thing that Rome gained. See, Carthage managed to control the Mediterranean because they had a strong and innovative navy that was large in size and also used a number of new and great tactics for naval combat. During the First Punic War, Rome had a great army but a weak navy. The Romans rapidly began studying Carthaginian naval tactics and built some of their own inventions from that knowledge. And this is how Rome's advancements in its navy was critical in order for it to become victorious in the Punic Wars. So now that the Romans controlled the Mediterranean, they also controlled all trade in the Mediterranean, which was a key element in building a strong economy. And the Republic also gained many prisoners of war, which became slaves, another great boost to the economy. So the Punic Wars ended with Rome gaining territory, strengthening its military, growing its economy, and completely destroying a dominant rival power. Another important thing to note is that Rome came in contact with many other important civilizations during the Punic Wars, such as the Greeks, which greatly influenced Roman literature, art, philosophy, and many other parts of Roman culture. And this pretty much would be the height of the Roman Republic. Now, as time went on, Rome started to face the worst of its growing internal issues. The divide between the rich and the poor was getting out of control, and politics started to allow more and more power to those with wealth and left the working class of Rome with less rights and privileges. Many in the Senate were divided on the issue, making it harder to pass reforms and movements trying to solve this problem. This division in the Senate would cause a lot of rivalry between different senators competing for power. Some in the Senate built alliances with a few other members, such as the First Triumvirate. The First Triumvirate was an alliance formed by Pompey, a well-known general with many achievements to his name, and basically another man who was wealthy named Crassus, and then another man who was growing in popularity named Gaius Julius Caesar. After Pompey lost his wife and Crassus died in combat, he disbanded the group and joined an opposing alliance known as the Optimates. Pompey became a sole consul and then made sure that no opposition among the Senate was able to overthrow him, and Caesar was his first target. Since Caesar had a lot of fame from his military accomplishments, he was granted some provinces in Gaul, which is now modern-day France. And basically, Caesar saw that he was going to be thrown out of power, and if he didn't act against Pompey and his new allies, something bad would obviously happen. And in 49 BCE, Caesar took one of his legions and illegally crossed a river known as the Rubicon, a border between Gaul and Italy. This action ignited a civil war that would be contained within the Republic, and Caesar launched a campaign to take Pompey out of power and put himself in power. Caesar won the civil war after eliminating many of his rivals and forcing the Senate to give him the title of permanent consul. Caesar's actions would forever disrupt the balance of power within the Republic, and while the Senate still existed, Julius Caesar had full control over the power of the Senate, ultimately making him the first dictator of Rome. Julius Caesar would continue to rally support and target any possible rivals until only a year later, when he was assassinated by multiple opposing senators on the Senate floor. After Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, many were competing for power, and the Senate was extremely divided once again. Now, without getting to the specifics to save time, Caesar's great-nephew, an adopted heir, Octavian, was fighting for power and was going to go against all of his opponents, just as many others were. Octavian would emerge successful in winning the civil war over Caesar's assassination and take his position with all of Rome's support. Octavian would take the title as the sole leader of Rome in 29 BCE. Octavian would try his best to make him hold all the power acceptable to the Senate and common people of Rome by restoring political institutions, which gave him a good impression on the public, but he still had full control over these institutions. Just 2 years later, in 27 BCE, the Senate granted Octavian the title of Augustus, and Octavian took the title. Octavian, now named Augustus, was the first emperor of Rome, thus ending the 482-year-old republic and ushering in a new era of an empire. Now at this point we can understand that Rome has been through a lot of both good and bad leadership, but surprisingly, as many people know, that putting all power into a single person's hands wouldn't probably end well. The rule of Augustus as emperor would be a good one. Augustus would create a number of various social reforms to improve living conditions in all provinces of the Roman Empire. The many achievements of inventions and discoveries made by the Romans, all these advancements and good leadership of Augustus would usher in a 200-year era of peace and stability throughout the empire, known as Pax Romana, Latin for Roman peace. When Augustus died in 14 AD, the Senate elevated Augustus to the status of god, which began the long-running tradition of basically making popular emperors into gods. And Augustus would also have several great military victories that would continue to show the strength of the Roman Empire at its best. The empire would expand its territories further and further. They would contain provinces all the way from modern-day England to modern-day Syria. The Roman Empire would also have some of the best armies of the ancient world. Iconic soldiers such as the legionaries are still incredibly popular until today. Roman engineers would construct works that would forever change the world. In fact, when I say the word Romans, many of these innovative and creative inventions would probably be the first things to pop up in your head. Another thing we think of when we hear the word Romans is Roman architecture. The Romans would develop arches, roads, bridges, and also be some of the first known civilizations to build grid-based cities. And they would also construct many different buildings, such as schools, theaters, and spas. And the Romans also invented concrete, which was a very great mixture for making buildings last, and is also one of the great reasons that we can view some of these modern-day ruins of Rome. Also, something I didn't mention too much, the Romans spoke Latin, a key language that would be importantly used throughout the Roman era, and is also one of the most oldest languages that we can actually still fluently understand today. Unfortunately, the line of emperors after Augustus wouldn't completely live up to this kind of title that he did. Although some did, many also did not, such as one emperor, Nero, who was in power from 54 AD to 68 AD. Nero excessively drained the Roman treasury and eventually led to his downfall and eventual suicide. Nero isn't the only instance of bad leadership and power, but in order to maintain the great status of the Roman Empire, you have to have some really good leadership and management going on. So this is one instance of where an emperor probably wasn't making the best decisions to, take care of the entire empire. Now there were still many emperors that did reasonably well and tried to manage the stability of the empire and do, reasonably well. And emperors such as Nerva and Trajan would continue to expand the empire's borders and wouldn't try to actually murder their own peers in order to secure their power and position, which obviously paid off by not starting any civil wars. But nonetheless, this series of good and bad emperors wouldn't cause immense damage to the Roman Empire. That is until Emperor Commodus was killed by his own ministers in 192 AD, which a harsh civil war erupted because of. This is typically seen by most historians as the end of Pax Romana. It was after this that Rome would fall into a terrible cycle of emperor after emperor. Now see, if you start to notice, many emperors would be assassinated by their own allies and opponents in order to gain and secure power, and this would come at the ultimate cost. Now see, the Roman Empire was still a very powerful empire and had much of a grip on Europe and other nearby regions. But in order to keep that great status, it would become overwhelmingly expensive, and with a lack of proper leadership, solving these issues would become insanely difficult, and Rome would inevitably set itself onto its own downfall. The biggest enemies of Rome were the increasingly aggressive tribes that were surrounding Rome on all corners, especially in Germania, which is modern-day Germany, and Gaul, which I said earlier is modern-day France. So now it's the 4th century AD, and Rome has very strong and aggressive tribes that were surrounding Rome on internal conflict. Especially in Germania, which is modern-day Germany, and Gaul, things are also taken earlier as modern-day France. So now it's the 4th century AD, and Rome has very strong enemies, and is experiencing a lot of internal conflict. And obviously things aren't going the way that most people would want them to be, but things are also taking an interesting turn. When Emperor Constantine moved the Roman capital to Byzantium, a large Greek city, the empire would begin to become divided between east and west. Constantine later renamed the city to Constantinople, after himself just a year later, in 325 AD. Constantine made Christianity Rome's official religion, a very important and massive change. Before that, Rome actually persecuted and punished Christians, Christianity being unpopular and disliked by many and being viewed as a religious cult. The empire was anything but united by this time, and now was facing more and more threats from invading forces. In 395 AD, the Roman Empire was split in two. They were still under the same flag and empire, but they were just governed in different ways to avoid collapsing under their own weight. See, the Western Roman Empire would start to lose land and money due to constant warfare between them and many tribes they were facing, who hated Roman rule over some of their provinces, especially the Germanic tribes. The Eastern Roman Empire would actually manage to keep itself fairly run, despite a lot of rebellion and corruption. The Western Empire would continue to lose territory and run into financial issues over the course of the next century. Emperors would no longer have an effective rule over Rome and could not handle the level of instability happening throughout the empire. Many other tribes and other invading forces swept through Western Roman Empire provinces in massive waves. Tribes would come together to form groups such as the Visigoths, Vandals, Angles, Saxons, Franks, Ostrogoths, and Lombards. These groups would also eventually carve out areas of territory to take. Some of these losses of land included when the Angles, Celts, and Saxons took over the island of Britain in 410 AD, and other groups like the Franks ended up controlling Gaul in 450 AD. I think we all know where this is going. Sadly, the 5th century for the Western Roman Empire would see its downfall after no longer being able to fend off invading forces. In 476 AD, Romulus Augustus, the last of the Roman emperors in the west, was overthrown by the German leader Odoacer, who became the first Germanic person to rule over Rome. It was at this moment that Rome had truly fallen. Now, although this did mark the end of Roman rule over Western Europe as we know it, the fall of Rome was also widely considered by historians to be the start of the Middle Ages. But interestingly enough, things were different for the Eastern Roman Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire would become known as the Byzantine Empire, and keep itself relatively powerful and most importantly intact. So when did the Byzantine Empire fall, you might ask? Well, that happened later in 1453 AD, when the growing new Ottoman Empire took control of Constantinople, and this marked the end of the final remnants of the Roman Empire. So, we've covered a lot about Rome transforming itself into a kingdom, a republic, and then an empire. And there were lots of ups and downs along the way. Now, Rome became a dominant power in Europe over the course of many centuries and would see many both good and bad leaders. Rome would rise to power through many great leaders, military conquests, advancements in technology, but would fall due to ineffective leadership, constant warfare, and financial debt. Nonetheless, this ancient civilization still holds relevance until today because of some of the most impeccable achievements that it had made over the course of a millennium. Rome would forever change the face of European culture and would make advancements that would hold significance until today. Unfortunately, no empire lasts forever, but the grand legacy of the Romans just might. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and this was the rise and fall of Rome.